Hey, I'm Nick.
And I'm Ally.
And this is But Have You Tried from the David A. Howe Public Library.
Here we are with another magic pick.
That's right.
Do you think people remember they were doing a magic pick, or do they just tune in and they're like, what the heck? Who chose this? Nick and Ally both don't know anything about it.
I don't know. Hey, you know what? Here's our connection to Star Wars Day. We pulled it from the Darth Vader
from the
mug.
Darth Vader chalice.
It's
important to specify that it's a chalice.
This was the pick that we pulled from the Darth Vader chalice because neither one of us had seen Citizen Kane before.
I literally knew nothing about it.
See, this is going to come into play in my feelings about this, but I knew the thing.
Okay.
And that was sort of, I wish I didn't know it.
Yeah, I feel like it would be a lot less enjoyable of a watch if you know
that definitely was
going.
at play. So it is Star Wars Day. So if you listen to the How's Things feed, you will hear a special Star Wars Day book club that Amanda and I did with Steve Rudd from This Endorian Life. Amanda and I have been doing these Star Wars Day book clubs together for many, many years. This year we read a graphic novel from our collection called Ewoks, which was, it had its ups and downs. I can share with you the recommendations from that podcast, and they are as follows. Amanda suggested a book called Survivor's Quest by Timothy Zahn. Steve suggested an anthology called Tales of the Bounty Hunters, which we, of course, have in the collection.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
And I suggested one called Master of Evil, which you and I talked about during a bookshelf a few episodes back. And those are all on a nice display right here in the David A. Howe Public Library next to the But Have You Tried bookshelf.
Look at that.
You can find all of those things. Where are you? How do you feel about The Mandalorian and Grogu? Because that is coming out this month.
Oh, is it? Oh my gosh.
To no fanfare.
I see. Okay. This is actually a big complaint that I have lately about streaming services. Okay. When they put out second and third seasons or like sequel shows, tie-ins and stuff like that, they don't advertise them at all.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you expect me to watch it if I don't even know it's coming?
Yeah.
I shouldn't be able to go a year without, not knowing that a new season of a show that I liked is out. Like, that's crazy.
I know.
Why are we doing that?
It is. But I don't know. I don't know why they're putting Mandalorian in theaters. It just seemed like it was so long ago. Like, the Mandalorian bubble or whatever was like literally 5 years ago. 6. I watched that show for the first time during the pandemic, and it had already kind of been underway for a while. So it just... Nothing ever.
Well, and I'm trying to remember where the series even left off, but I don't feel like there was a need for a movie, but a movie that doesn't happen for a while.
I'll go one further and say there's not really a need for a season 2 of The Mandalorian. That is a one and done premise.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's nothing to be enjoyed.
No,
after season 1,
I think there were definitely some really enjoyable things subsequently.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it was such a tight concept for the first season that I do feel like it was a stretch to do more seasons. And I'm glad I did, and I think they were good and worthwhile things. But I do feel like it was not planned to have more. It was obvious that they were okay, well, what else can we do?
Right. And never really were able to answer that question, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen the trailers for this movie, but it looks goofy AF. I had no concept that this was happening anytime soon. I heard that it was happening a long time ago. Yeah.
And I forgot about it because I don't know.
Maybe I'm part of the problem because I assume we'll see it. Some, not opening night. I'm not really excited about it, but I know there's going to be some rainy Saturday in the next couple months where I'm like, hey, you know what? Let's go see a Star Wars.
I feel like sometimes the issue that I have when movies come out that I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be good, and I don't necessarily want people to I don't want to convey the message with my money that I'm like, you should do more of this stuff. I still have that curiosity. I'm like, do I think that's going to be good? No. Yeah. But do I need to know what's going to happen? Do I need to experience it? Yes.
Okay.
So I do feel like that's sometimes an issue.
Of all the things that are coming out for the rest of the year, I'm talking pop culture-y kind of things. We've got Supergirl on the horizon, the new Spider-Man, we got the Avengers movies and stuff. The one that I'm finding myself most eagerly anticipating is Masters of the Universe. I don't know. Do you have any history with He-Man? Do you care? He-Man, She-Ra?
Not really. I know what those things are, mostly.
I think that you would have a good time with the DreamWorks animated She-Ra series that came out, I don't know, the last 10 years or so.
I have heard very good things about it, and I did at one point watch, I think, the first episode with two of my friends. We were trying to decide, are we going to watch this show right now, or are we going to watch a different show? And we watched the pilot of each kind of to decide. And it seemed fun, but I was feeling a little nauseous when we watched it, and the bright colors.
Okay.
I was I can't, if I look at this right now, I'm going to be sick.
Yeah.
So nothing against the show. I was just not
it just made you want to
physically capable of watching it at that time, and I have not watched it since then.
For whatever reason, I'm in a He-Man She-Ra mood, and I never finished that series. The She-Ra. I think I watched most of the first season, and I know we have several seasons on DVD here, and I'm sure it's still streaming in places. So maybe this is the time that I'm going to catch up on it. So
seems timely.
Anyway, I don't know why, but I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's watch a He-Man movie.
Fair enough.
Yeah. But we're not talking about a He-Man movie today. We're far from it.
We're talking about Citizen Kane.
Yeah, Citizen Kane. Often cited as the greatest movie of all time.
Yeah.
Many lists.
What do you think about that?
Do I think it's the greatest movie of all time? I don't.
I don't either.
Okay.
I thought it was pretty good, but I certainly wouldn't say greatest movie of all time.
I've actually been kind of sweating this episode because I don't want to sit here and be like, well, that was a dud. You know, but
is that what you were about to say? Are you about to say that was a dud?
As I was watching this, our conversation from the last bookshelf episode, when you asked me how I feel about rating things on Storygraph, and I said I've rated goofy graphic novels higher than I've graded like Pride and Prejudice.
Right.
And I feel like there's a similar thing at play here.
Yeah,
because there's many things to appreciate, and I think that I understand why it's held up in the way that it is. Does that mean it's an enjoyable movie to sit down and watch? I don't think so. You know, you're like white knuckling it over there.
I'm so ready for this hot take. We got to start all the drama on this podcast.
Okay. Well, let's go back a little bit. Tell me, what, if any, history do you have with Citizen Kane?
Literally none.
Nothing.
Like I literally, when we were compiling the list of things to put in the Magic Pick Darth Vader chalice, you were like, Citizen Kane is a movie I've never seen, and I was like, I didn't even know that movie exists, so I'm putting it on the list.
Oh my gosh, okay. So you didn't even, like, the name meant nothing to you.
Nothing.
Oh, okay. Well, I worked in a university libraries for many years before coming here, and there was a film history class that obviously they watched Citizen Kane. So
makes sense.
Every year I was pulling, we had 10 or 11 copies at whatever it was, and I would put those on reserve so students would come in, and constantly, like, depending on the time of the year, I was checking out Citizen Kane 1,000 times.
Makes sense.
The premise of Citizen Kane is about Kane uttering the word rosebud on his deathbed, and that is what sets off this exploration into how we learn about Kane, because a journalist is trying to figure out, what does that mean? I've always known what that means. Like, I don't know how. I mean, that's been spoofed so many times, and it's just a thing that I was just fully aware of going into this. So I didn't think that would be a huge deal, but I think it actually was quite a big deal.
Yeah.
Knowing that information, and I think that colored my experience of it. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want the hate mail to start too soon. So why don't you hit us with some facts?
I've got some facts. Which I should also say, I didn't look up any facts about it before watching it. I was just like, all right, pop it in. Okay. And then afterward, I was like, all right, we need to find out some things. Okay, so this is a 1941 American film written by Orson Welles and Herman J. Mankiewicz, and also directed by and starring Welles, who I also didn't know anything about.
Oh, okay. Like War of the Worlds or anything like that?
I mean, like, I knew about War of the Worlds, but, like, not because of Orson Welles.
Right.
So, lacking context there on my part. It follows the life of Charles Foster Kane, who's a character based on some newspaper tycoons and I think other just kind of like bigwig money guys of the time. Which actually, as I was watching the movie, I was like Googling. I was like, is this about a real person? And Google was like, kind of, but also no.
Yeah, a little bit. It's definitely an amalgamation.
Anyway, and kind of how this happened is Orson Welles was really successful with the Mercury Theater and War of the Worlds, as discussed. And then Hollywood was like, hey, we want to like snap this guy up. Yeah. So they signed him, but they were basically kind of like, yeah, like you're for sure a newbie to Hollywood, but like you can have some creative freedom and like come up with this movie idea. So anyway, this was eventually the resulting movie, which I don't know. I'm curious where the idea for that, like, I don't know. I'm curious how you get to the idea of this. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. But despite the kind of critical success of the movie, it didn't recoup the costs in the box office, perhaps partly because one of the newspaper guys it was based on like didn't say anything about it in any of his papers. There you go. He was like, we're not even going to acknowledge that this exists, which I think is petty and funny.
Yeah, it is.
But anyway, it kind of faded from view until the late 50s, and then it was praised by André Bazin, who was a film critic. And it was also voted number 9 on the Brussels 12 list at the 1958 World Expo. And that's kind of when it became like, I don't know, that was like the start of it being cited as like this great.
Right, and then it was sort of rediscovered. And since then
and like re-released and everything.
I feel like it's like The Godfather and Citizen Kane are always jockeying for that number 1 position on many a list.
The Godfather is also one I haven't seen.
I have seen The Godfather.
But I've seen like so many things that reference and spoof it. So I'm like curious. I'm like, when I eventually watch it, because I'm sure I will, like, again, like, what's that going to feel like with having seen so many references to it?
I think, too, there's something, too, about, like, the time in which, like, we are consuming this movie, because I'm thinking about, like, I never read To Kill a Mockingbird as a child or in school or anything like that. I was like a full-grown adult here running a book club on it. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it, but I also was like, I've read so many things like this.
Yeah.
And it's like, To Kill a Mockingbird is the progenitor of that. Like do you have like Grishams and people like that if you don't have like To Kill a Mockingbird, as a prototype for that sort of thing. And so you have to kind of remember that. And I feel like in some ways that's how I felt about this too, is that like this type of movie, the camera shots that it's famous for and things like that have become such a part of filmmaking that it's like things that would have been shocking and interesting at the time are kind of like, oh, they're doing that thing, and just because this movie sort of invented those things, like, doesn't change the fact that I've seen so many things that are mimicking that over the years. And so you have to kind of step back, I think, and appreciate that and look at it, and be like, yeah, but this is the one, this is the one that started it all.
Yeah, well, and I do feel like to that point, I feel like if I knew more about film on like a technical level and like the cinematography of it, I feel like I would probably like have more. Like, it's not that I didn't appreciate it and I thought there were some really interesting things that it did, but I feel like I would be able to appreciate it on a deeper level if I had more of that knowledge.
Yeah. I also sort of feel like the cynicism of the modern era also takes this premise of this, this pillar of society is actually, kind of a jerk and an awful person. And like, he sort of bought his own story and gradually like turns into this villain when that's not how he started out. Like that. I think that concept of taking this like dashing leading man and just demolishing him over the course of his life is something that we are so used to, both in fiction and in fact, and in politics, that I think that is no longer a shock. Like, you're expecting it,
right.
It's like in any sort of, comic book movie or something where it's like, oh, I have this mentor that I trust so much, and what? He's the villain? Like, that
couldn't have seen that one coming.
That is such a cliche that it no longer has any meaning or value. And so, again, I think seeing that for the first time, and would have been more noteworthy than it is today. Yeah,
well, and like there is kind of a tragedy to the story of like, so it's like this journalist is like tracking down all these people who know him, and it's kind of spinning out through flashbacks this whole story of his life. And so it's like you see him when he's a kid and he's just like playing in the snow and like doesn't really want to go be a rich dude, and so it's like
good instinct.
Yeah, good instinct. And then like I think it's like much later in the film, not like toward the end, but where like there's one flashback where he's having a conversation with someone and he's like, I think it's like his banker, and they're like, oh, whatever, don't you think you're a good person? And he's like, well, maybe, but like probably I could have been a better person if I not had all this money.
Right.
And I thought that was a really interesting line and like really self-aware, given how kind of like how much ultimately of a jerk that he kind of is, like overall through the story.
And
I don't know.
What, 1940? What did you say the date was? 1941. So we're not even that, a little over a decade from the Great Depression even. And so, the takedown of wealth and what that means and everything in that context is also very different from maybe, how it would be seen even a decade or so later when it was rediscovered. So there's a lot of really interesting pieces to it. And I think Orson Welles as an actor was really appealing to me. Mm-hmm. Like, he made so many weird decisions that I really appreciated. And there was something very timeless about, especially when he's playing the more dashing version of that, that it just doesn't feel like a cookie cutter kind of leading man. He's doing something with it every step of the way, something that I think the freshness of that performance does still hold true. Yeah. Like, and I feel 80 like years later.
In a way that also makes it feel lifelike.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I feel like it's not like, oh, that's like exactly the same type of character and type of person that I've seen so many times. But I feel like it lends some nuance of like, oh, like this is a this is a real person that I can imagine, of someone who kind of has some of these characteristics and like tries to do some good things, but is like weighed down. You know, like, I don't know. I feel like it felt, I don't know, I guess very true to life, like his performance, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it struck me that I feel like I would have enjoyed this. Like, this is a play that I would like to direct. You know
That's
what I mean?
fair. Mm-hmm.
Like, I think some of the constructs of live theater, I think, would have really suited the story a lot better than a film medium would have. At least, like, to my taste, I could see that really like playing out on stage in a different way, in a way that I think would have been more palatable to me, maybe. But I think that the core concepts are good and strong. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, you look at Spielberg citing this as like a massive inspiration on him, and it's like some of the shots in Jaws where you're like really uptight on the face and you see something in the background, or there's this mess with perspective where you're distracted by the foreground, so something that is, you know, happening in the distance is actually what you're meant to be focusing on, and you have to, as like an audience member, you have to kind of be switching and being like, no, I have to focus on this, I have to disregard. And so I think there's a lot of misdirection and stuff that you can see in the films of Spielberg or other people who are influenced by that. There's a lot of shots where we're watching this and I'm like, oh, it's a Hitchcock shot, but then I have to remind myself, no,
that's where Hitchcock got this.
No, it's not. You know, so I think for that reason, I was interested in this more as just like a study than I was interested in watching it as a narrative or a film or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought as a movie, it felt a little dull to me.
Yeah. But some of that I wonder is like, because I was watching it and I was like, this is really interesting. This is a really interesting narrative setup. It reminds me a little bit of that Meg Ryan movie, Courage Under Fire, where it's like they're all telling the different perspectives on what happened, and you're trying to figure out which one is accurate. And again, I'm like, oh, okay, so like this is probably a little bit where they got that idea, you know? But like, the like structure of like, he's kind of the main character, but we're never seeing it through his perspective. I thought that was really interesting, and like the way the story was made, and like again, like we're following this journalist the whole time, but we know basically nothing about him other than he's trying to figure out, you know, what's going on.
It takes a long time even to hear him talk. Like you have a while where people are talking,
and it's like, and then like I don't know, like 3/4 of the way through the movie, you finally get his name, and you're like, oh, that's who you are. So like a lot of that stuff I thought was really interesting, but I was like, it's a little long, and it's a little slow, and I feel like if it was paced a little differently. I wonder if like some of what
you're just talking like from a writing standpoint. You're saying like the narrative itself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I just feel like the mystery was interesting, and I feel like the development of like here's all the things that happened were interesting, but it felt like it was taking a long time to get there. You know what I mean? I was like, all right, like when are we gonna find out what this rosebud thing is? Right. But some of that I think is maybe just like our modern sensibilities of like how things should be paced. Yeah. So I wonder if there was like a remake of this, like how much more exciting it would feel to us now with our like more the taste that we're used to in terms of like modern film.
Right. I also think like ultimately, I don't know, I'm trying not to spoil this 80-year-old movie, but I think ultimately like his desire for simplicity when he very clearly has everything, like the whole concept of Xanadu, and it's like it's this big palace, this, you know, this testament to his success in terms of wealth and all of that. Like he has everything, and what he wants is sort of nothing. Like he wants to go back to, you know, simplicity. And I feel like again now that's what I want. I mean, that's what we all want. You know what I mean? We all want to get away from like the world in which we live and go back to a time when we weren't constantly obsessing and refreshing news sources and everything like that, you know? But I think that having that be what this is ultimately all about in the 1940s, when we're at sort of like the peak of this concept of the American dream, again, would have been a subversion of expectations and like what people are meant to want, what you're told that you want the most. He doesn't want it at all. And to your earlier point about the quote of saying he probably would have been better, both as a person and just content without all the money and everything is, I don't know. I just think that's a concept that exploring it in that way was maybe a little ahead of its time.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting. There's a line also later in the film where I don't remember who says it, but it's someone who's talking about him. And they're like, oh, he's a man who got everything he wanted and then lost it all. But I feel like what the film was kind of saying is like at the end he didn't really get what he actually wanted.
No, I think definitely that's true.
And I also think
he got everything he was meant to want.
Yeah,
You're told that you want.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I also think it's an interesting choice that at the end of the film, like the what Rosebud is revealed to the viewer, but not to the journalist, not to anyone else.
Right.
They never find out.
Yeah.
And it was getting to the point at the end where I was like, are we going to find out?
Yeah.
Or is it just going to be like, well, we don't know.
Yep.
But I feel like that's also kind of an interesting choice.
Well, I think, too, if you look at what his relationship with his second wife, where he decides that she needs to be something, she needs to be a success, and is forcing this opera career on her that she really doesn't want, and it unravels her, it unhinges her, you know? And I think if you sort of look at what he ultimately wants, it was like he was trying to put this artifice on her as well, rather than recognizing that that was the thing that was making him unhappy, you know? I think that's interesting, too, and you see it play out in her so much quicker because she just, you know, ultimately they share a fate.
Yeah.
But he was kind of choosing these things for himself, either to spite, you know, the banker who adopted him, or because that's what he felt that he wanted. Whereas for her, it was more forced on her. And I think because it was coming from the outside, she just couldn't stand up to it. And that's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting also that the kind of like irony of it about like what sort of first appeals to him about her is like she doesn't even know who he is.
Right.
And like she's living a more simple lifestyle than he is.
Right.
And like that seems to really draw him. And then when it's like, oh, whatever, like everyone finds out about this and now, you know, like now we're getting married, it's a whole thing. Then it's like he's kind of taking away from her the thing that most intrigued him in the first place. And I'm so puzzled too by like some of that because it feels like at about that point in the story, like when he marries his second wife and there's all this like drama and gossip around it, that feels like really the turning point of like when a lot of the things that he initially said he was going to do, he's like, I'm going to tell the truth with this newspaper and all of that. He kind of really makes, it's not like a sudden turn, but it is a hard turn toward being like, no, I'm going to write in the newspaper that my wife is great as an opera star, even though she's not. And she's having a terrible time doing it.
Right.
So like, I'm kind of intrigued by that moment being such a like not necessarily a complete turning point, but a like really solidifying that path on which he's going.
Right. Well, and even just like what you're saying here with him altering what the paper says and everything, the concept of manipulating the press for his own whatever, like at that level, I don't know how new a concept that would have been either. You know what I mean? Like, was that something that people were aware of? Was that something that was being criticized, you know, the power of the press and all that? Or was the idea of using the press as a way to corrupt and mislead and everything, would that have been something that people were not used to seeing?
That's a good question. I don't know either. I mean, it feels like if you know that this guy is the one who puts out this newspaper and this newspaper is saying how fantastic his wife is as an opera singer, it feels like you'd be able to be like, all right, but maybe, you know,
that's true.
Maybe there's some bias there, but I just don't know like how that kind of, I guess, almost conflict of interest was perceived at that time. Yeah,
I don't know. It just seems like there's a certain point where he begins to believe the hype and like becomes a character of himself and ultimately spirals, and it's a sad story, you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
bit of a bummer.
Yeah, and you can see it like from his origins and everything when you find out about his childhood and like being shipped off and everything. And you kind of see that as the moment where there's a real break in like what he is and who he is and what he wants to be and all that. I mean, you can't really escape that trauma. You know, going back to the Storygraph example, it's like you can't deny the role this plays in film history, and to talk about it and discuss it, you know, you see just how unique it is, you know, and when you think about the history of like, you know, we're a couple decades into film in general, you know, and to take it and like tip it on its head and be like, we're going to do something that you've never seen before, something totally different. It's like, it hasn't been time for that to become old hat and everything.
Yeah.
So to subvert it so early also, I think is kind of a visionary thing to do. So does that mean it's an enjoyable 2 hours? I guess that's
what I'm saying. If it was just a little shorter, I feel like that would, but I mean, I don't know. Some of that is just my own.
Yeah.
I don't like to sit still for more than an hour at a time. So, you know, that's my own problem.
No,
I enjoyed it, but I don't know if I would be like, let's, you know, it's a cozy weekend. Let's break out Citizen Kane. I don't think that'd be happening.
Would you watch it again?
Maybe. I feel like the most appealing idea to me of rewatching this movie is watching it with someone else and like talking to them the whole time about everything interesting that's happening. You know what I mean? Like I feel like Like, I don't know that I would just sit down by myself and watch it again, but I feel like if I was watching it with someone else and we were like, we're going to talk about all the interesting narrative and cinematography things that they do, I feel like that sounds fun to me.
Yeah. There's a scene sort of in the middle where there's these huge windows and the camera is focused on someone very close, like the face is very close, and he just walks this super long distance, and they do this scene with them being very far apart, with him under the giant window and in the face of the foreground. And that I felt like was really, I don't know, it just the way it messed with, perceptions and space and everything. I felt like that was really compelling. And so for things like that, I feel like a rewatch would be really beneficial, just to kind of be like, all right, I know what it is. I know where we're going. I know, the goals and everything here. And I think then I could kind of go back and be looking at all these
and all
things,
the details. Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's something that you could say about maybe something like a Kubrick movie, like The Shining, for example. You look at that as a story, and then like on rewatch and everything, you're seeing all these visual cues and all these things that are teed up and paid off, and things that are teed up and maybe not paid off. Or, I think that both are movies that the more you watch, the more you find new things. I could really see, I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but I think that if I did, I would probably like it more with each watch.
Yeah,
I
could see that.
Yeah. Well, the Darth Vader mug has served us well on this special Star Wars Day as we discuss Citizen Kane. Well, I know you like Citizen Kane?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Every time I read a book by Joyce Carol Oates, I'm like, boy, I really appreciated that. And that's how I feel about this.
Yeah, that's fair.
I appreciated it.
That's fair.
Well, that's what I'll say.
There are some books that it's like someone will be like, wow, did you like this book? And I'll be like, well, I mean, it was devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Glad I watched it. It's an interesting experience. It's a crucial piece of like film and pop culture history. And that's worth it, I think. I would say I would recommend, breaking news. You should watch Citizen Kane.
You should watch Citizen Kane. But if you, like me, also had never heard of it before now, you should go home and watch it.
This could be your time.
This could be the moment.
I am a lot more interested in Orson Welles as an actor.
Yeah.
And I know that this was the one that he had the most free reign on, and then after this, the things were recut. And there's lots of things said about his career as it goes from here, but there was something really magnetic about him, and I would love to explore a little bit more of that filmography.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, Allie, I know that you appreciated Citizen Kane, but have you tried Yoshi's Crafted World on the Nintendo Switch?
I have not.
Yes! I think this is going to be a good time for you, then. I think this is going to be a good... Do you have a Nintendo Switch?
Well, Caleb does, but
okay.
Yes.
All right. I know that because I was texting him this morning, figuring out which video game systems you had access to.
Nice.
So, yes, Yoshi's Crafted World is a very fun time. There's also Yoshi's Woolly World, which is on Wii U. There's the Yoshi Story back from Nintendo 64. So it's like there's a new Yoshi game every couple of decades, and I really think that a Crafted World is going to hit you just right.
Well, I'm excited to try it.
Yeah.
We have talked about Yoshi stuff a fair amount as we've been like on this journey.
On the Wii U journey, yeah.
Right.
I would love for you to play. I mean, maybe you just need to come to my house. We just need to sit down and play Yoshi's Woolly World because it's all yarn-based.
Yeah, that is cool.
But Crafted World is a little newer, and it also has some of those elements. And what a great pivot, I think, from Citizen Kane to Yoshi's.
That's something
when I think of one, I honestly think of the other.
Well, now, like we're always going to have this association, I feel, That's something I really enjoy about this podcast is the way that we'll be like, all right, Anna Karenina, and now Sabrina Carpenter. It's just like...
Yep. We are but...
we contain multitudes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about all the things that we are reading and watching and playing.
Yes.
And then in a month, we'll see what Allie thinks of Yoshi's Crafted World.
Sounds good.
All right. We'll see you then.
See you then.